Hello, everyone. We are now live in Keene, New Hampshire with Allan Savory and Julie Davison, who is the hub leader of the new hub that they're starting and the new Savory hub. And we just had a wonderful weekend here with Allan kicking off the new hub. So I'm here with my Soil for Climate colleague, Carl. So Carl, why don't you just give a good shout out to everyone.
Sure. Hello, everybody, wherever you are. We're here in Keene, New Hampshire, a beautiful New England small town, and happy to have participated in the Savory Hub launch of Stonewall Farm yesterday and today.
And we're also here, like I said, with Julie Davison, who is the hub leader of the new Savory Hub in Keene, New Hampshire. And for me, living in the Boston area, it's really exciting to have a hub starting here.
Do you want to show Julie?
Julie, yeah, here, Julie, this sort of way.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, there's Julie. And then we will take questions also for Julie. So if you're interested about becoming a hub leader, or what does it mean to be a hub leader, what was her inspiration, or what are her hopes, you can also ask those questions. And feel free to ask the questions, in the comment area. Okay, so let's just start right off. Let's turn it over to Allan. Allan, I know you talked last night, and you've been talking more and more about the importance of holistic management and restorative grazing on a global, human civilization survival level, and that's what interests me. I'm interested in climate, obviously. And so let's start right there at the highest level. What's the ultimate importance of this to civilization in the future?
Well, as you say, Seth, this is what I talked about last night. Really is about how do we save civilization, all our families, all our communities, our wildlife, all of these things. How do we realistically save them speedily, because we're running out of time? And so last night I talked about that, about if we look at global desertification and climate change as where we're heading, and you can look at many problems: droughts and floods, increasing poverty, violence, emigration, abuse of women and children, loss of wildlife, and all of these things, but they're symptoms. So if we take global desertification and climate change, I talked about what scientists are blaming, which is livestock, coal and oil. I explained that these are resources and no resource can ever cause a problem, and how we can be sure with 100% certainty that what is causing all of these things, as I say, climate change, desertification, is management. And then I explained how we, when we look at management, somebody took Sarah, my daughter, to task the other day for describing how we needed to be managing holistically, and how that was maybe the only thing we could do, and said, look, you need to be aware that there are dozens of ways of managing. If you go to libraries of universities or anything, there are many ways of managing. And I said, yes, that is the belief. You can manage dictatorially, democratically, collaboratively, etc. But if you peel the onion and keep getting down to, in any management in the world, any management, how at the end of the day are the actions taken, the decisions made? And you find it's universally the same, and it's reductionist management. So there actually, if we peel the onion like that, there are only two ways of managing available to humans that we know. Reductionist management, which we've done for centuries, which is causing the problems, or holistic management, as far as we've got it developed, or what develops from it. And it's not going to be static. And so I talked about that last night. And then I said, if we're going to save our families and our situations, what should we focus on in management, etc.? And clearly it needs to be agriculture, because agriculture is the production of food and fiber from the world's land and waters. It's not just crop production. So the whole planet is engaged virtually in agriculture today: fisheries, forestry, wildlife, all of these things, livestock, crops, they're all agriculture. And agriculture is today the most destructive, extractive industry that we've ever had. So that's the place to focus. And then what we talked about last night, which is terribly critical, and I'm just summarizing it because it was filmed, it was recorded, so everything I said last night can be looked at and listened to. And the next point I made, and this is critical for our audience now, is when we manage big undertakings, whatever they are, we do not do it as individuals. We do it through organizations. So if a country went to war, for instance, it wouldn't be each individual going to war, it would be an army. You see, we do everything. So we form organizations and we have them for good reason, because that's how we can act in a coordinated manner. And our organizations are efficient, they're an efficient way of doing things. So you have universities and environmental organizations, and cattlemen's organizations and governments and United Nations. But then I explain to people that when we form an organization that takes on a life of its own, no organization behaves like a human behaves. Even you look at this in law, when an organization murders hundreds of people, we do not try them for murder. And nobody faces a death penalty for that. All right, we don't treat them like a human. And there are, because they are complex, there are only two really complex systems that, as defined by system science. There's human organizations that are complex, self-organizing, etc., and there's nature that is complex. And then everything else we deal with, the computer we're using, the technology we're using today, the space vehicles, everything is something we make, and that is never complex. This computer is not complex. It's complicated, but it's a complex, hard system. And then anything that we make, which is a hard system, the problems are kind. We can cure them easily. But everything we manage, our human organizations, church groups, whatever they are, and nature, when problems occur, they're very difficult to solve. They're wicked problems. So if you look at desertification, which we're talking about, it was absolutely incapable of solution for 50,000 years. And then we solved that problem. Now, climate change, as we're facing it today, is not solvable by our institutions. And so this is a dangerous, very dangerous situation we face. And we talked about the wicked problems of organizations and how they are endangering us. And one of them is the fact that our organizations reflect the views of society. And so they lead the way with anything we believe in. So visit any organization and they'll have the latest cell phones, the latest computers, the latest software, they lead the way. But when something differs, new insights arise that society doesn't believe, then our organizations don't, and they lead the ridicule and the rejection, and nothing has changed since Galileo's time. So we need to heed that. So we talked about it and we can discuss it now.
Okay, so let's talk about the problem that's in the world right now and then come back to the sort of management. So let's just get down, like really down to the nitty gritty. Explain the desertification that you see going on around the world. Give the examples and bring in the part about ruminants and the absence of ruminants and the role of livestock in reversing desertification.
Yeah, that's very simple, because when we manage reductionist management today, we have to do so through tools. So we cannot do anything without picking up a tool. So if we're going to manage desertification, you have to do it with a tool. Now, humans, if we look at it and believe what society believes, it's that we've got thousands of options. There are many tools we can use, but there aren't. If you, again, digest this and break it down, there's only the tool of technology. That's everything we make, from the original Stone Age tools to the computers and everything we use today. That's technology. So if you try to deal with desertification, which is a biological problem, with technology, it's incapable of solution. So the first and most common tool we have cannot solve that problem. Now, the second tool we got after Stone Age tools was fire. And if fire is chemical breakdown, rapid breakdown of vegetation, so it's incapable of solving the problem of desertification, which is bare ground due to gradual oxidation of grasslands in sunlight, etc. So for 99.9% of human existence, we had two tools: technology, ever advancing through the copper, the bronze, the Iron Age, or we had fire. Neither of those can solve the problem. And the only other tool we developed over the last 10,000 years, recent time, was the idea, the concept of using rest or conservation as a tool. Let nature recover, using that positively like a tool. Well, that causes desertification in seasonal rainfall environments. So the three tools in the reductionist toolbox of all humankind are incapable of solving that problem. That's why we didn't for 10,000 years.
Okay, just really quickly, that point about how letting it rest causes the problem of desertification in seasonal rainfall environments. Just talk about that for a second.
Okay, when you are in humid environments of the world, the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the areas like this where we are in New Hampshire, which is humid most of the year, resting land, leaving it to nature, is the most powerful tool we have to restore biodiversity. That's why biodiversity is being restored in national parks in those environments, etc. Now, if you go to New Mexico or Nevada or Zimbabwe or 2/3 of the world where the humidity is not evenly distributed, you can get 2, 3, 1 month, 4 months of rain. It can be high or low rainfall. Then you get 6 months, 8 months, or whatever of dryness. When you go to those environments, if you rest the environment, all right, things begin to break down. Now, the reason for that is when the soils, the soil life, the vegetation, the animal life, the plant life, the insect life, everything developed, everything co-developed together. You didn't get soil before plants. You didn't get plants before animals, all right? You got them all developing together. Without plants and animals, you don't have soil. You only have rocks, sand, etc. Okay. Now, did you get animals first or plants? No. If you look at the animal and plant kingdom, you get to where it's hard to decide: is this an animal or a plant? Right? We co-evolve together, and in these seasonal rainfall environments of the world, which is most of the world's land, the land, the plants, the soils, everything. These are the environments where we had millions, billions of large herbivores. And during that dry period of the year, the humidity was in the gut of the animal. The microorganisms were in the gut of the animal, and that's what broke the vegetation down so it could biologically cycle. Because birth, death, growth, and decay, that cycle has to keep going every year. And if you rest the land over most of the world, that cycle breaks down. So the only thing that can break the rest isn't technology, isn't fire. Resting land it's only animals. And that's why I said in the TED talk, we have no option but to bring in the idea of using large herbivores as tools.
Allan, thank you for explaining that. And I want to remind you to our audience is out there on the internet, look to the camera as much as you can. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Dalmas Tiampati of Kenya. Hi, Dalmas, I see you're there, and I'm holding the Maasai stick. And it's been an honor for me to learn about holistic management in Africa and to go to Kenya. And we are working on a project now with the Maasai in Kenya, and we're very hopeful about that.
Well, Seth, I'm glad I don't have to look at you and I've got to look at the camera.
Right, so look at the camera, you don't have to look at me. Now let's take questions. Carl, do you have some questions to give us from the internet?
Sure. First question we have from Royce Davis, who asks, would Allan please remind us again of the definition of holistic management? If one is managing holistically, what is one actually doing?
Okay, that's an easy one. I assume everybody heard that. And I did clearly define it last night, which is helpful. Let me start with reductionist. What is reductionist, and then what is holistic? In when you're managing, you are always managing complexity, social, environmental, cultural, economic. You cannot avoid it. And in our conventional management, we take management actions with a reason or in a context. And we always, even with the most sophisticated scientific teams, we take that web of complexity and we reduce it, and you see that the reason or context for our actions is always to meet a need or a desire or to solve a problem. And it's very rare that we take a management action outside of that one of those contexts or reasons. Now, that is what is causing global desertification and climate change, that and the absence of the tools to do the job. So what is holistic management? Holistic management merely means at the government level, the household level, any level. It just means we start working in whole situations. We say, who is involved? Who is actually doing the management? Who is influenced by the management? What are the resources being managed? And now those people that are managing, they develop a new idea, a concept of a holistic context. So they develop this new idea of one overarching context or reason for the policy or the actions. And that describes how you want your life to be based on your culture, your beliefs, spiritual, etc. And we tie that to your life-supporting environment. There can be no prejudice in it. So organic can't be in the thing, that's a prejudice. It just describes 100% what you want, 0% how to do it. And then you have a context. Now you go about management and you meet your needs, you meet your desires, you solve problems, but in that context, with that reason. And we have 7 checks that people can learn quickly to check that your actions are in the holistic context, in your own situation. And we bring in the idea of an extra tool. Livestock is a tool. You won't use them in your home, but you need them as a tool in the toolbox. And basically that's it. So it's a very subtle but important change. And immediately you begin to get totally different results to the management.
Thank you, Allan. Carl, is there another question we want to take from Facebook?
Sure. Hang on just a moment.
So if you're watching, you can type your question for Allan in the comment area. And our loving assistant, Carl, will read the question. In the meantime, Allan, while Carl is taking a question from the internet, can you explain a little bit about the desertification that you saw in Africa and also the improvements that you've seen since doing the new management?
Well, obviously, growing up in Africa, I first saw desertification there, and really serious desertification the first time I went to Senegal and Mali in 1960. But then the same desertification you're seeing in Nevada and California, and it's all over. It's global, I now realize. And then once we begin reversing it, which is relatively easy to do, and the response you see very quickly, if you start bringing in livestock, which is the only thing that can really reverse desertification, and the holistic planned grazing that I explained in the TED talk, it's impossible not to get results. Because if you've had the land for centuries or 100 years or whatever, the main influences on the land have been rest, just not enough animals to disturb things, which is standard practice worldwide, so it's partial rest. There are animals on the land, but not in adequate numbers and behavior to disturb things. And you're overgrazing plants, which has been a standard practice in the world. So if those have been the main influence, and periodic fire, and you've got severe desertification as you have some California or Nevada or any of these places, and you do the opposite. You now stop overgrazing plants by timing the movements. You stop overresting the land by changing the behavior of the animals, and you stop using fire to rapidly cycle nutrients because it's chemical breakdown. So you're now doing three things that are the opposite that to the practices on that land for the last 100 years. It is physically impossible for that land not to change. And you see that change within the first year. And we got a lovely example in this country, Keith Weber at Ohio State University, Idaho State University, sorry. He was doing a study which he involved me in. We had a lot of NASA funding, and he took very, very bad condition land there, and he did a study with continuous grazing, the government system. He did one with protecting the land, doing nothing, and one where we simulated holistic management, and we had all the recording equipment we needed to put in sensors in the ground and record the moisture, etc. And I warned him not to expect significant results within about 5 years because the land was so bad. Well, I was wrong, thankfully, and he got highly significant results the first year. And that was amazing to me. So that's a published paper. Incidentally, a range scientist wouldn't publish the paper, but it was published in Desert Research or some other periodical.
Also, Allan, I just want to say, I've been to Zimbabwe, obviously, and
we haven't recovered yet.
Yeah, you're still recovering from that. You need a long rest period. But I've seen the efficacy of the work for the people on the internet. If you're wondering why I'm so much of an advocate for this, because I've seen it. I've stood in the tall grass in areas that were just a few years before were desert, and even if you just drive a few kilometers to the national park, you see the capped land, and so the difference is really striking, and it can happen very quickly. Carl, so do we have a question from Facebook?
Sure. Another question.
Can you say who submitted the question?
Royce Davis, another question from Royce, who says, in Australia and perhaps globally, a common sentiment is that change is painful, and to change is to risk everything. It's only when the pain of staying outweighs the pain of change do we get real change. Is this true? How do we take ourselves through this?
I don't know quite how to answer that. Yes, change is risky, etc. But really what I'm talking about, and I said this last night when I talked at a very deep level about where we're going, everything I said was common sense. Nothing I said was rocket science. Everything I said, I haven't been able to get a single scientist to tell me where it's wrong in 50 years, either logically or scientifically. And there was nothing I said last night that any high school leaving kid couldn't understand immediately. So if we look at risk in changing, the greatest risk any human can take, all of us humans can take, is to keep on managing in the reductionist management that humans do. That risk is total. We have destroyed more than 20 civilizations in all regions of the world, and now we're facing the global threat of the collapse of civilizations. So what bigger risk can you take? The biggest risk is carrying on as we are. The risk when you shift to managing holistically is zero. Why? Because we've been doing it for 50 years roughly. We cannot make it fail theoretically. It is working in practice, and in any case, in the process is the step that if you are applying any new practice in an environment where it's never been done before, we automatically assume we're wrong, and we complete a feedback loop on that assumption so that management is proactive. So how is there any risk in that? There isn't. The risk is in doing what we're doing and keeping on. So more than saying that, I don't know how to answer that question. Yes, risk change is threatening, but if we don't change, we're doomed.
Right. If I can also offer an answer to that based on the conference yesterday, there were some people in the audience who were farmers, and they said, my neighbors looked at me like, what are you doing? That's crazy. But in July, when there was a drought and they still had grass, and their neighboring farmers were bringing in hay, they're like, well, who's crazy now? So within a few years, you really see the improvement. Carl, is there another question from the internet, or do you want to
Sure.
add?
I would like to ask Allan if he could talk a little bit about the Savory Hub Network and how farms might be able to join this network and what the function of the network is and so forth.
Yeah, the idea that we are pursuing at the moment is to focus on the grasslands of the world first, because that's the area where we'll get the highest returns. I hate that cliche, low hanging fruit, but it is. And to do it through this hub basis. I pointed out in the talk last night that the world is leaderless. You cannot look for leadership in the change that is needed from any institution, politician, etc. The change, when you need to change from reductionist to holistic, can only come from ordinary people. And when they insist, then our institutions can change. All right, so how do we get ordinary people working in universities, in government agencies, on farms, but still as humans? How can we get them collaborating as team humanity and beginning to manage holistically and teach each other in their communities and pool their knowledge, etc.? And we're doing it through this hub movement. So when you call them Savory hubs, no, they're only coordinated through the Savory Institute, but they're independent, locally led hubs, promoting their own work, doing their own stuff, and we are trying to get greater synergy around the world by getting them all helping each other, and that's beginning to happen. So I've actually been and seen a hub in Sweden communicating with a hub in Argentina and beginning to help each other solve problems, that type of thing. So the idea is to have locally led, locally managed hubs where people from any walk of life are working together, collaborating together, managing holistically, learning, and we're keeping up the quality of the work, the standards of the work, and preventing dilution, because we have to try to prevent dilution. I sometimes use the example of languages. The English is spoken in many different accents and so on around the world, but you can understand the English, and so it's global now, all right? But English and the Dutch language got to Southern Africa at about the same time. Now, the Dutch language in Southern Africa became Afrikaans. You speak Afrikaans and you're not understood anywhere in the world. Why was it the Dutch language became Afrikaans and not useful anywhere else in the world except there, where the English language has become the global language? And the answer is the Dutch in South Africa did not keep in touch with Holland and the coordination of the language. The English, wherever they were being coordinated by keeping in touch with London, with the center of it. So you need some way to prevent dilution of the knowledge. We used to say in my country, we had the old message that if I tell Seth something and he tells you, Carl, when I say to him, send reinforcements, we're going to advance, by the time Seth has told you that, it becomes send refreshments, we're going to a dance, all right? So we've got to have some way of getting the quality control, because within 6 months of me starting to train people in the United States, we had 13 derivations of my work that will all fail, will all lead to desertification, mob grazing, short duration grazing, management intensive grazing system. All of these developed within 6 months of me starting to teach people. They all missed the punchline, the planning process. So that's why the hubs are going to be very, very critical.
Dalmas in Kenya is wondering, what are the requirements for joining the hub network?
Oh, I don't have them all in my head. The essential one is having some land base and getting together, and then the materials can be obtained. The Savory Institute provides training for the hub leaders, boot camps, etc. And in fact, you might talk to this more than me because you're involved in it.
Yeah, Carl, actually, do you want to maybe just switch places with Julie for a second?
Sure.
And then she can come closer. Okay, so we're gonna hear from Julie Davison now, who is the hub leader of the new Savory Hub in Keene, New Hampshire.
Hello. So we're talking about the requirements of the joining the hub network, and as Allan mentioned, having a land base so you can set up a demonstration site is key and important to it. Also attending the trainings, there's a boot camp training and a holistic management intensive training. Setting up your financial management plan for the hub. That's another requirement. Establishing and implementing the ecological monitoring. Those are some of the other pieces that we've been putting together in the business plan for the hub. So we've been working on that process for the past year. That's led us to our launch event yesterday, and that was a great day of networking and connecting. And we're looking forward to nurturing and growing, and for us, connecting with other people who are doing the work and sharing that knowledge base. But also, as Allan was talking about, preserving the integrity of holistic management and how that's practiced is critically important. So, but it's applied differently in at each hub, and it's a different context. So, connecting and talking about that has been an important part of the journey for us.
Julie, talk a little bit about your farm, about Stonewall Farm, and also I'm particularly interested in the ecological monitoring. And also, if you don't mind, could you just perhaps come a little bit closer to the camera?
Sure. Stonewall Farm is a small dairy farm located in the southwest corner of New Hampshire. We have been an organic farm for a long time, but we wanted to do more than be organic. And I appreciate Allan's comment earlier about organic just says something about what you want to achieve. It's not about what we're doing. And we were looking for a way to improve our pastures. So it started off as a practical application, but as we've gotten deeper into the process, it's also important for us that we're contributing to hopefully finding solutions for, as Allan has described, it's one of the biggest problems facing humanity. So connecting and being part of that work and helping to accelerate it and implement it at a larger scale. I can't imagine doing more important work in my life right now. So.
And just talk really quickly about the ecological monitoring.
So ecological monitoring is a way that we verify the changes on the land. So this is our first year doing it. We're establishing a baseline so we can indicate, what is the status of the land right now. We look at plant density and, soil conditions. Is it capped or is it covered? And so we monitor those changes over time. And there's two different methods that we use to do that. There's comprehensive and basic monitoring. And the exciting thing that we're doing at our hub is we're involving students in the area. So we're getting younger people involved in that process, so they're learning about it. We have an environmental science class from the local high school that'll be helping us monitor and collect data, as well as local colleges. So it's great way to engage our community and the local schools in the next generation of leaders. So.
Excellent, and it was a real pleasure to be there yesterday. If people have other questions for Julie Davison, who is the new hub leader, go ahead and submit them. Also, we started about 10 minutes late, so if it's okay, we'll go about another 10 minutes. Carl, is there another question over the internet that you want to ask?
Yes, Brian Engler asks, for those of us living in cities, what is the single best thing we can do to help reverse desertification?
It's get involved. Again, I talked about that when I ended last night. Get involved. Get involved in the health, the food movement, good, nutritious food, because that's one way we're getting the thinking into cities. Most of the population's gone to cities now. Get involved with the closest hub if you can. I long for the day when a city adopts a hub, and so city people are going out looking at what's going on, etc. But you have to get involved and concerned, because the political power, the economic power, everything has gone to the cities, and they are so out of touch with the reality on the land that no city can exist, no church can exist, no army, no government, no university without agriculture. And today, agriculture is the most destructive industry we've ever had in the history of mankind. So city people have to start getting involved. and then learning from there.
And Alan, if I can add to that, I'm a city person basically, and our organization, Soil for Climate, just announced a sort of an educational or communications partnership with Big Picture Beef, and who is will probably be sourcing from holistic grazers in the Northeast area, and our objective is to help educate people about why this type of grazing is a climate solution. Again, we're Soil for Climate. So when you restore soil, that's a climate solution. You're drawing the carbon down. And the way you restore soil on most of the world is going to be with this type of regenerative grazing, holistic planned grazing. And so the best thing a person in the city can do, my colleagues can do, is demand, well, for now, if you go to the supermarket, you can see grass-fed beef. I mean, it just says grass-fed, and you don't really know how it was managed. And chances are probably it wasn't managed appropriately, even if it says grass-fed. But at least if it says grass-fed, it's a step better than the CAFO product. But eventually there will be a label, right? There will be a label that the Savory Institute
that brings that up, and we haven't talked about it, is through the Hub movement, and the Savory Institute is coordinating it all, and many people are beginning to collaborate, and institutions are beginning to collaborate. They are coming up with a land to market program, and people can learn about that through the Savory Institute website. But essentially, this is for the first time ever a certification based on results, not the method you use. So you can be farming anyway, but we'll be certifying that this product, whatever it is, leather, wool, meat, whatever, this product can be traced right back to the farm or the origin, and it is regenerating the soil, regenerating the community, the economy, etc. So it'll be terribly important for city people to be able to know that if I support with my purchasing dollar this handbag, this pair of shoes, or milk, or whatever, it is actually part of regenerative agriculture, saving my city, because anything outside that will not be.
That's right. And also people who live in cities, it's the agriculture around the cities that controls the watershed. Carl, maybe you can take care of that. And your watersheds are controlled by the land management, often by the farming and ranching around it. And so that's why it will be essential to support this type of grazing management where the ecological outcome is verified. Not just what they're doing, but the measurement, the soil carbon data is going up, the biological diversity is going up, that type of thing. Also, Alan, in terms of sort of wrapping up the last 5 or 10 minutes, I actually heard an interview with you the other day on another show, and I apologize, I can't cite who was the fellow that interviewed you, but I thought it was quite a good interview. And you were starting to talk about reversing desertification in the Horn of Africa, and then going into Turkey and Central Asia, and you really sort of gave the global view of the desertification that's spreading over everywhere, and how we need to reverse it. And it really touched me, at a deep level. Like, this is a massive global problem, and I wonder if you could just sort of readdress that issue, and in terms of the hopeful vision. What's the hopeful vision for how we can bring back the great grasslands of the world?
Well, the desertification, I think if you want to get the importance of it, just to think of yourself as a citizen anywhere in Europe, for example. The political face of Europe is being changed by immigration. Where's that immigration coming from, and why? All right, it's changing everybody's lives. It's produced Brexit, and it's going to produce more and more violence in all likelihood. Now, what is the origin? Where is that coming from? And if you look at the great region right across North Africa, all those North African countries, right up into China and across to India, all of that land is desertifying. All of that land, only about 5% of it, if we're lucky, can produce crops. So 95% of that land can only feed people and clothe people basically from animals. That means holistic plant grazing if we were to reverse the desertification. But you can look at probably there are hundreds of celebrities, certainly in America, Europe, who are jumping on the bandwagon of being vegetarian, vegan, vilifying livestock. What are they doing to Europe? What are they doing to their own families? What are they doing to the millions of people who are going to die in violence in North Africa? People just don't see the interconnection. It is all connected. And so if we're going to solve even the problems of Europe, much of it is going to be solved in Africa, not in Europe. These are all connected. So yeah, it's terribly critical. And we've got more hope now. I like to use the analogy of flying. For 10,000 years, we did not know how to fly. Hundreds of men died trying to learn to fly. Then on a given day, the Wright brothers flew. We didn't stop there. Once we knew how to fly, within 70 years, we were on the moon. Now, for 10, 50,000 years, we didn't know what was causing desertification and now climate change. We discovered what was causing it in about 1984 and got a solution to it, a way to solve it. We should be flying. We should be getting to the moon. We're not because of our institutions, academic criticism, egos, and all sorts of complications in our institutions, and it's blocking us. We need humans to understand we've got more hope now than we've ever had in history, because we understand that management is the cause, not livestock, not coal, not oil, not greed, not all the things we're blaming. It is us, every one of us, who's engaged in reductionist management.
Allan, what does it look like if we're flying, if we're soaring, if we're going to the moon in terms of Earth restoration using this tool? What does it look like?
The rivers would begin to flow free again. Every farmer would be absolutely happy to drink the water coming off his land or her land. They're not today. I will drink the water coming off our land in Zimbabwe. I'm happy to drink that water any day coming off our land. How many farmers in America are prepared to? And that'll be part of it. Every factory owner should be made to drink the dam water that comes out of the factory. Then you're being responsible to society. Yeah. So it'll be a very different world with rivers beginning to flow again, grasslands teeming with wildlife and everything again. You can come to Dimgabe and look at it and see the contrast with national parks. Many people do not realize that some of the worst loss of biodiversity, habitat destruction of land is in national parks in the United States and around us in Africa. That will be over. Our national parks should be thriving biodiversity. So it'll be a very different world without the land degradation leading to poverty, violence, social breakdown, abuse of women and children. And these are all symptoms of land degradation. Thousands of people will be flocking back to the land for a better life, not fleeing the land for a life of low dignity. You can live in dignity with poverty on the land. You cannot in the city easily.
Allan, that's just a wonderful way, I think, to kind of sum up everything I have to say. Carl or Julie, do you have any other questions or last comments?
Sure. We just got a comment from our friends at Nori, which is an organization that is working to use blockchain technology and cryptocurrency to enable a global carbon market. And our friend Christoph Josby says that Nori is on board. We can help unblock. So very much appreciate that. There was a question about what would it mean for a city to become part of the hub network. And I think your last answer responded somewhat to that with the factories and businesses basically should be discharging drinking water, for example. And other questions, I don't know what you want to respond to, concern whether livestock systems, are the most effective way to get carbon back into the ground. And also, what can someone do, a small landholder who has perhaps 2 to 5 acres or so forth? So you can answer.
Well, you threw a lot of things at me there. With our livestock systems, they called it, but is livestock essential to getting the carbon back into the ground? That is, whether you agree or not with climate change, many people don't agree. Just think desertification. If I bear 1 square meter of soil, I promise you, go barefoot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a hot day. It'll be so hot you can't put your foot on it. You go at dawn, it'll be very cold. So it's colder and it's hotter every day than it would be if it was covered with litter or some vegetation. So you've changed the microenvironment. By the time you're doing that over all of Nevada, half of California, blah, 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 you're changing macroclimate. So anybody who doesn't believe that humans are changing climate, forget about the carbon, forget about the oil and the fuel, just think desertification. It's impossible for us not to be changing the climate with our management of desertification. Now, only livestock can heal that. No technology can, or anything else, as I've explained. So that part of itself, we've just got to get that message out. Now, what was the other part of the?
What can somebody do on a small scale if we have, say, 2 to 5 acres to work with?
Yeah, well, don't confuse ownership and management. So if you're a small scale, just manage holistically. If you're in a city, just in a job, manage your life holistically. Just start learning. We give examples in the textbook of people doing that. Now, if you've got small properties around a city or something, again, read the textbook, because if your small properties are around here, you will not do great harm if you rest them. Because if you rest this land here, it'll go to forest. And it doesn't do great harm to anything. It won't desertify. Now, if you've got small properties around Santa Fe or Albuquerque or something like that, now jointly, all of you are resting your properties, the land will turn to desert. So now don't confuse ownership and management. So we could all own small properties around in a brittle environment, low rainfall, seasonal rainfall, such as, say, Santa Fe, and as long as we retain ownership of our properties, we can be jointly managing them, because only livestock can stop that desertification that you'll see all around Santa Fe or Albuquerque, places like that, Phoenix or wherever. So if you're in a small property, this answer is the same: manage holistically.
Now, if I may, I know we need to sort of wrap up shortly. Just also getting to the city question, it's a really good question, and I think that's sort of a question we should sort of hold for a while. You know, what really does a city look like that's managed that way, and what is the role of the city? And I live in a city, and you know, I think city is where the buying power is, and you think of how purchases in the city impact the management, the land management behavior around it. So I think cities can be huge players in terms of how they make decisions about their watershed and purchasing. And we hope to be involved with that. Carl and I are in the Boston, Cambridge area, and we hope to be, you know, play some role perhaps in that area. And also, again, I want to remind people we are Soil for Climate, so we advocate for soil as a climate solution. And the reason why we're so excited about holistic management and the work that Allan is demonstrating is because it restores soil, and I've seen it. I've seen it in Zimbabwe, I've seen it in Kenya, I've seen it in South Africa. And really, I have this expression, I call it standing in the efficacy. And when you're standing in grass this high in an area that used to be desert, that's efficacy, okay? That's proof. And then if you pull, you can't pull the plants out because they're there too hard. But when you dig them out and you see all the soil, and so check out the Soil for Climate website and Facebook page, and go to the Holistic Management or Savory Institute website and Facebook page. And they just have so much great stuff happening, and the land to market stuff that's happening. And then just in terms of the math, you know, the math is there. That is, if we restore all the grasslands that Allan is talking about, we really can draw down enough carbon from the atmosphere to at least get us into like a safe level, around 300 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're around 400 parts per million now. and it's possible. And in the process, oh yeah, by the way, you restore biodiversity, you restore watersheds, you bring back wildlife, rural pastoral people get their lives back. So all these other things happen as well. So I'm ready to close. Are there any last comments?
Perhaps you should call yourself Soil for Cities.
Well, it's interesting. I was actually toying with there's a million versions of what we could call ourselves. Was there any last, Julie?
I have a question.
Oh, we have a question from the cameraman. Go for it.
You mentioned yesterday that cities don't have a Savory center yet, or something like that.
Yes, there isn't a city hub, but there could
Okay.
be.
What could Boston be? That's my question.
Yes, a city
What
could
can we do
develop
for
a
Boston
hub.
to be a hub center?
A city could easily develop a hub.
So the question from the audience was, could Boston be a hub? And certainly, I would be excited to work on that.
Explore that.
Yeah. Julie, any last words? You're, the new Savory
Well,
hub.
I would just encourage people to look at the Savory Institute website. From there, you can learn all about the hub network that's global, where the hubs are located, how to get involved, and how to get involved on an individual level. And that's another entry point where a lot of city folks can get involved. So.
Carl, any last word?
Thank you for joining us, and let's all work to get more carbon back into the soil.
Okay, Allan.
No, thank you for participating in this. And no, just thank you. We've said enough.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.